Caleb Finch stood on the balcony of his high-rise apartment, gazing out over the sprawling neon-lit cityscape of Neo-Chicago in the year 2125. The city, once a beacon of human ingenuity, now teetered on the brink of collapse. The sky was perpetually tainted with a sickly orange hue, a result of relentless pollution and the overuse of Earth's dwindling resources. Below, the streets buzzed with chaos, hover cars zoomed past holographic advertisements, and the air was thick with the sounds of sirens and distant explosions. Inside, the apartment was a stark contrast to the outside world. Minimalist and sleek, it was a testament to the advanced technology that had become both a blessing and a curse for humanity. Caleb, a young and idealistic member of the Chrono Collective, the last vestige of hope against temporal disruptions, prepared for what he believed would be his most critical mission. Yet, Caleb wasn't just any time traveler. His commitment to reshaping history stemmed from witnessing the undeniable decline of civilization. He had seen cities reduced to rubble, forests turned to deserts, and oceans choked with plastic. Wars over clean water and fertile land had become the norm, driven by a desperation that had no place in a world once ruled by progress and innovation. His time travel device, a sleek device that looked more like a modern wristwatch than a piece of advanced machinery, rested on the table beside him. It was his key to the past, his chance to alter the course of history and prevent the apocalypse that awaited humanity. Caleb took a deep breath, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. He glanced at the device, ensuring all systems were operational. "All right, let's change the future," he whispered to himself, determination hardening his features. As he activated the device, the room began to hum with energy. The walls blurred, colors swirled, and the sensation of being pulled through time overwhelmed him. Just as he was about to set his destination to the pivotal year of 1985, a sudden surge caused the machine to malfunction. Alarms blared, and the device sparked uncontrollably. Instead of landing in his intended target year, Caleb found himself disoriented in a place that seemed both familiar and alien. He staggered outside, only to realize he was in the past, not the 22nd century he knew, but the 1980s, a time he believed was primitive compared to his own. The streets were filled with classic cars, people dressed in vibrant, retro fashions, and the air carried the nostalgic scent of a bygone era. But beneath this veneer of peace, Caleb sensed an undercurrent of tension. As he navigated the bustling city, he overheard conversations about environmental issues, corporate greed, and political unrest, echoes of the very problems he had hoped to prevent. Caleb's initial excitement quickly waned as he understood the gravity of his unintended landing. The 1980s were not a haven, they were the seedbed of the future's destruction. Determined to fulfill his mission despite the setback, he resolved to find a way to influence key events without further disrupting the timeline. Caleb's first encounter was with a group of passionate environmental activists protesting outside a major corporation's headquarters. Their signs read, "Save our planet," and "Stop the exploitation." Intrigued, he approached them, blending in with the crowd. One activist, a fiery woman named Lena Morales, caught his attention. She was fervently speaking to a small gathering about the imminent dangers of unchecked industrialization. Caleb felt an immediate connection. Here was a glimpse of the resistance that would eventually shape the dire future he knew. "You're passionate about this," Caleb remarked, stepping forward. Lena turned, her eyes scanning him skeptically. "Who are you supposed to be?" "Someone who cares," Caleb replied honestly. "I've seen where this path leads us." Lena's skepticism softened slightly. "It's easy to talk about change when you haven't lived through the consequences. What can you do to help?" Caleb decided to reveal a fragment of his true purpose. He couldn't disclose the full extent of his time-traveling abilities, but he needed allies. "I have ideas, strategies that could push for more effective environmental policies and sustainable practices. We need to approach this systematically." Over the next few weeks, Caleb ingrained himself deeper into the activist movement, leveraging his knowledge of future events to influence policy changes and corporate behaviors. He used his understanding of technological advancements to introduce sustainable methods of production, hoping to curb the rampant resource exploitation that would eventually lead to Earth's downfall. His efforts paid off initially. Corporations began adopting greener practices, and governments enacted stricter environmental regulations. Caleb watched with cautious optimism as the seeds of a better future seemed to take root, but optimism was short-lived. As Caleb pushed for more stringent regulations, unintended economic repercussions began to surface. Major corporations, unable to adapt quickly enough, faced massive losses. Stock markets became volatile, and public confidence plummeted. The sudden economic instability triggered widespread unemployment and poverty, igniting social unrest. Protests erupted not just against corporations but against the very governments that had implemented the new policies. The military was deployed to maintain order, but their presence only heightened tensions. Caleb observed the spiraling situation with growing concern. One evening, as he sat in a dimly lit cafe discussing strategies with Lena, the news played on the nearby screen, reporting on the global economic crash. Headlines screamed about bankruptcies, riots, and the militarization of resources. Lena looked distraught. "Caleb, what have we done? I thought we were making progress." Caleb felt a pang of guilt. "I didn't anticipate this. It seems like in trying to fix one problem, we've created another." The economic crash had accelerated the very conflicts Caleb had aimed to prevent. Resource wars broke out earlier than expected, and the scarcity of essential materials like clean water and energy sources fueled violent confrontations worldwide. The world was descending into chaos, much faster and more intensely than Caleb had foreseen. In a moment of desperation, Caleb realized that his well-intentioned interventions were backfiring. Instead of preventing the collapse, he had hastened it, pushing society towards even more extreme measures to survive. Determined to rectify his mistakes, Caleb decided to take a different approach. If intervening directly in pivotal moments was causing more harm than good, perhaps a subtler strategy would yield better results. He opted to influence cultural and societal norms, hoping to instill a deeper sense of sustainability and cooperation without triggering economic upheaval. Caleb immersed himself in the local communities, fostering grassroots movements and educational initiatives. He introduced sustainable farming techniques, promoted renewable energy sources, and encouraged the adoption of eco-friendly technologies. Slowly, pockets of resilience began to emerge, communities that thrived despite the overarching turmoil. However, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that his efforts were only delaying the inevitable. The fundamental issues of human greed and resource exploitation were too deeply ingrained to be fully addressed through isolated interventions. As the years passed, Caleb watched as the world remained on a precarious balance, oscillating between fleeting periods of progress and subsequent crashes. One night, while reflecting on his journey so far, Caleb received a message from Dr. Evelyn Hart, the head of the Chrono Collective. Her message was urgent and cryptic. "Caleb, your actions are causing temporal anomalies. Cease your interventions immediately or risk irreparable damage to the timeline." Caleb was taken aback. He had believed he was acting in the best interest of humanity, but now he faced warnings about the very fabric of time unraveling. Torn between his duty to the collective and his desire to save the world, Caleb pondered his next move. Ignoring the warning was not an option. Caleb needed to understand the extent of the temporal anomalies his actions had caused. He delved into research, uncovering the delicate balance of events that maintained the timeline. Every intervention he made, no matter how small, had ripple effects that altered the course of history in unpredictable ways. Caleb realized that the timeline was more resilient yet more fragile than he had imagined. His attempts to prevent the future collapse were not linear fixes but complex interactions that often led to unforeseen consequences. Each change he made created a new branch of reality, diverging further from his original mission. In a final bid to restore balance, Caleb decided to make one last significant intervention. He planned to influence a major technological breakthrough that would accelerate sustainable technologies, hoping to create a tipping point where humanity could advance without depleting resources. He focused his efforts on a brilliant young scientist named Dr. Maya Lin, whose groundbreaking research in renewable energy held the key to a sustainable future. Caleb orchestrated opportunities for Maya to present her findings, secure funding, and gain recognition. Under his subtle guidance, Maya's work flourished, and her innovations began to transform the energy landscape. For a moment, it seemed like Caleb had succeeded. The advancements in renewable energy began to stabilize resource consumption, and the global reliance on fossil fuels decreased significantly. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief as the immediate crisis of resource depletion seemed to abate, but as history has a way of unfolding, Caleb soon discovered that his success was short-lived. The rapid advancement of renewable energy technologies sparked a new kind of competition. Nations, eager to assert their dominance in this emerging field, began to race for technological superiority. This new competition led to the development of even more powerful and potentially dangerous technologies. What was intended to stabilize the environment became a catalyst for new forms of warfare. Countries developed advanced energy weapons and sought to control the global energy grid, turning the world into a high-stakes battleground for technological supremacy. Caleb watched in horror as the delicate balance he had helped achieve began to crumble. The race for renewable energy dominance led to unprecedented levels of militarization and espionage. Alliances shifted rapidly, and the world descended into a new era of conflict, this time driven by the pursuit of sustainable dominance rather than resource scarcity. In the midst of this chaos, Caleb realized that his interventions were creating a world where the problems were merely shifting rather than being resolved. The fundamental human traits of ambition, greed, and the thirst for power remained unchanged, merely redirected towards new objectives. Desperate to find a solution, Caleb sought out Dr. Evelyn Hart for guidance. Their meeting was tense, the weight of his actions evident in his weary eyes. "Evelyn, I need your help. My interventions are causing more harm than good." "I don't know what to do," Caleb confessed, his voice heavy with regret. Evelyn sighed, her expression a mix of concern and frustration. "Caleb, time is a delicate fabric. Each change you make has profound effects that are difficult to predict. Perhaps it's time to reconsider your approach, or even your mission." "But we can't just stand by and watch humanity destroy itself," Caleb insisted. "There has to be a way to guide us toward a better future without causing these catastrophic shifts." Evelyn shook her head. "The timeline has its own resilience. Sometimes, the best course of action is to let events unfold naturally. Our interference might be doing more harm than good." Caleb pondered her words, the truth of them sinking in. He had set out with the noble intention of saving humanity, but his actions had only accelerated its downfall in different forms. The realization was both sobering and painful. Refusing to give up, Caleb decided to embark on a new strategy, one that focused on influencing individual actions rather than attempting to alter large-scale events. He believed that by inspiring key individuals to adopt sustainable practices and ethical leadership, he could create a ripple effect that would gradually steer humanity away from self-destruction. His target was Amelia Reyes, a young environmental scientist whose innovative ideas had the potential to revolutionize sustainable living. Caleb introduced himself to Amelia, presenting himself as a mentor and collaborator. He shared insights and techniques that would enhance her research, pushing her to explore uncharted territories in renewable energy and environmental conservation. Amelia was initially skeptical but soon recognized Caleb's brilliance and dedication. Under his guidance, her work accelerated, leading to breakthroughs that promised a more sustainable future. Caleb felt a renewed sense of hope as he watched Amelia's influence grow, spreading her ideas across various sectors and inspiring others to follow suit. However, as Amelia's reputation soared, so did the competition and envy from rival scientists and corporations. The same traits of ambition and greed that Caleb had hoped to mitigate now manifested in new forms, driving individuals and organizations to exploit Amelia's innovations for their own gain. Patents were stolen, research was sabotaged, and corporate espionage became rampant. The breakthroughs that were meant to save humanity were now tools for manipulation and control. Caleb watched helplessly as the very progress he had fostered was twisted into weapons of power and dominance. The world, once again, spiraled into conflict, but this time the battles were fought over intellectual property and technological advancements rather than basic resources. The cycle of human self-destruction seemed endless, each attempt to change history only paving the way for new forms of chaos. Realizing that his efforts were futile, Caleb grappled with a profound sense of despair. Each intervention, no matter how well-intentioned, only served to highlight the inherent flaws within human nature. The realization that humanity was doomed to repeat its destructive patterns weighed heavily on him. Determined to find a final solution, Caleb decided to journey even further back in time, seeking to address the root causes of humanity's downfall. His sights were set on the early 1700s, during the dawn of the Age of Enlightenment, a period marked by intellectual fervor and the beginnings of industrialization. Caleb believed that by influencing the thinkers and leaders of this era, he could instill a sense of balance and sustainability that would steer humanity away from the path of destruction. It was a risky move, but he felt it was his last hope. Caleb felt the familiar surge of energy as his time machine activated once more. This time, he aimed for the early 1700s, a period teetering on the brink of the Age of Enlightenment. His mission was clear: influence the thinkers and leaders of this era to instill a sense of balance and sustainability, hoping to divert humanity from the path that led to its eventual downfall. As the machine hummed and the surroundings blurred, Caleb braced himself for the journey ahead. When the disorientation subsided, Caleb found himself standing in the bustling streets of London, circa 1705. The city was alive with the sights and sounds of a burgeoning industrial hub. Smoke billowed from chimneys, and the clatter of machinery filled the air. Caleb knew he had arrived at a critical juncture. The dawn of industrialization was about to reshape the world in ways that would echo into the future. His first objective was clear: identify and influence key figures of the Enlightenment who could steer society toward a more sustainable and conscientious path. Among these figures was Isaac Newton, a renowned mathematician and physicist whose work had already begun to lay the foundations for modern science. Caleb believed that by guiding Newton's thinking, he could instill principles that emphasized harmony with nature and ethical scientific advancement. Caleb sought an audience with Newton, navigating the intricate social circles of London to gain access to the esteemed scholar. After weeks of persistence, he was granted a meeting in Newton's study at Trinity College. The room was lined with bookshelves, filled with volumes on mathematics, astronomy, and alchemy. Newton sat hunched over his desk, scribbling equations by candlelight. "Professor Newton," Caleb began, extending a hand. "My name is Caleb Finch. I have traveled from the future to discuss some concerns I have about the direction of scientific progress." Newton looked up, his piercing blue eyes assessing Caleb with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "From the future, you say? Such claims are not uncommon, yet few hold any truth. What brings you to my study?" Caleb took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I've witnessed the consequences of unbridled scientific advancement. While your work has the potential to illuminate the world, it also holds the power to disrupt the balance of nature. I believe that with the right guidance, we can ensure that progress does not come at the expense of our planet." Newton leaned back, contemplating Caleb's words. "Your concerns are unconventional. Science, in its purest form, seeks to understand and improve. How do you propose we balance advancement with sustainability?" Caleb shared his vision of a future where technology and nature coexisted harmoniously. He emphasized the importance of ethical considerations in scientific pursuits and the need for foresight in technological development. Newton listened intently, intrigued by the notion of integrating sustainability into the very fabric of scientific inquiry. Over the following months, Caleb worked closely with Newton, subtly influencing his research and encouraging him to explore alternative energy sources and sustainable practices. They collaborated on experiments that prioritized environmental harmony, laying the groundwork for innovations that would prioritize the Earth's well-being. Emboldened by their collaboration, Caleb expanded his efforts to include other key figures of the Enlightenment, such as Benjamin Franklin and Voltaire. With each influential thinker he guided, Caleb felt a glimmer of hope that humanity's trajectory could be altered for the better. However, history has a way of resisting change, and Caleb's interventions began to produce unexpected consequences. As the years progressed, the early signs of a more sustainable industrial revolution emerged. Factories began adopting cleaner technologies, and there was a noticeable shift toward environmentally conscious practices. Caleb observed these developments with cautious optimism, believing that his efforts were finally bearing fruit, yet, as he delved deeper into this altered timeline, he began to notice subtle shifts that hinted at underlying instability. The technological advancements, though more sustainable, led to an accelerated pace of industrial growth. Nations, eager to capitalize on these innovations, entered into fierce competition to dominate the emerging green technologies market. This race for technological supremacy ignited a new kind of tension. Countries that once cooperated in scientific endeavors now engaged in espionage and sabotage to secure proprietary advancements. The pursuit of sustainable dominance overshadowed the original intent of harmony with nature, transforming environmental stewardship into a battlefield for power and control. Caleb watched in dismay as alliances fractured and rivalries intensified. The very principles he had sought to promote were being exploited for nationalistic gain, leading to heightened militarization and covert conflicts. The global landscape became a hotbed of mistrust and aggression, reminiscent of the resource wars he had attempted to prevent in his original timeline. Realizing that his interventions were inadvertently fostering a different form of chaos, Caleb grappled with the implications of his actions. The sustainable technologies he had championed were now the very tools driving humanity toward a new kind of self-destruction. The cycle of ambition and greed remained unbroken, merely redirected toward novel objectives. Desperate to find a solution, Caleb turned to his only remaining contact from the Chrono Collective, Dr. Evelyn Hart. He reached out through a secure temporal communication channel, explaining the dire situation his interventions had caused. "Evelyn, my attempts to alter the past have only exacerbated the problem," Caleb confessed, his voice tinged with despair. "Instead of preventing resource wars, I've triggered a race for technological dominance that threatens to plunge humanity into a new era of conflict." Evelyn's response was immediate and stern. "Caleb, you must cease your interventions. Each change you make creates ripples that can destabilize the timeline further. The fabric of time is more fragile than you realize." "But Evelyn, we have to try something. If we don't, the future I witnessed will come to pass," Caleb pleaded. "There has to be a way to guide humanity toward a sustainable and peaceful future without triggering these new conflicts." Evelyn remained unmoved. "The timeline has its own inherent resilience. Our interference may be doing more harm than good. Perhaps it's time to accept that some events are beyond our control." Caleb felt the weight of her words settle upon him. He had set out with the noble intention of saving humanity, but his actions had only served to highlight the unchanging flaws within human nature. The realization that he was powerless to alter humanity's fundamental traits of ambition and greed was both sobering and heartbreaking. Undeterred by Evelyn's warnings, Caleb resolved to embark on one final attempt to salvage the timeline. He decided to journey even further back, aiming for the early 1700s during the Age of Enlightenment, where he hoped to address the root causes of humanity's downfall. His plan was to influence the thinkers and leaders of this pivotal era, instilling principles of balance and sustainability from the very inception of industrialization. With a heavy heart, Caleb activated his time machine once more, preparing for the treacherous journey ahead. The machine whirred to life, and the familiar blur of colors enveloped him as he traveled back through the annals of time. Emerging in the midst of the Enlightenment, Caleb immersed himself in the intellectual fervor that characterized the period. He sought out influential philosophers, scientists, and industrialists, engaging them in discussions about the importance of sustainable progress. His goal was to embed a consciousness of environmental stewardship and ethical responsibility into the very fabric of scientific and industrial advancement. One of his most significant interactions was with Voltaire, the renowned writer and philosopher. Caleb found himself in a lively salon in Paris, surrounded by intellectuals debating the merits of reason and progress. "Voltaire," Caleb began, approaching the esteemed thinker with a respectful nod. Your work has the power to shape the minds of a generation. Have you considered the long-term implications of unbridled progress on our environment? Voltaire raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the question. Progress, monsieur, is the very essence of our age. It drives humanity forward, expands our knowledge, and elevates our society. Why should we temper it with concerns of the environment? Caleb took a deep breath, choosing his words with care. Because progress without foresight can lead to unintended consequences. The industrial advancements we champion today could one day threaten the very planet that sustains us. I propose that we incorporate sustainability into our scientific and industrial endeavors from the outset. Voltaire pondered Caleb's words, his sharp intellect processing the implications. A thought-provoking notion. To intertwine sustainability with progress could indeed preserve our environment for future generations. Your perspective merits consideration. Encouraged by Voltaire's receptiveness, Caleb continued his mission, engaging with other key figures of the Enlightenment. He collaborated with Benjamin Franklin, encouraging innovations in renewable energy, and worked alongside Isaac Newton, fostering a scientific approach that prioritized environmental harmony. For a time, it seemed that Caleb's efforts were successful. The foundations for a more sustainable industrial revolution were being laid, with principles of ethical advancement and environmental stewardship taking root. Caleb felt a renewed sense of hope, believing that this could be the turning point that would alter humanity's destiny. However, history has a way of resisting even the most earnest attempts at change. As the Enlightenment progressed, Caleb began to notice subtle shifts that indicated his interventions were having unforeseen effects. The emphasis on sustainability and ethical progress, while noble, introduced new dynamics that altered the course of industrialization in unexpected ways. The integration of environmental consciousness into scientific endeavors led to a divergence in technological development. Innovations that might have otherwise emerged organically were now being steered toward specific applications. While this resulted in some positive outcomes, it also stifled the spontaneous creativity that had driven the original Industrial Revolution. Moreover, the altered emphasis on sustainability created a new set of challenges. Industries that might have otherwise thrived through sheer competition were now constrained by ethical considerations and environmental regulations. This led to increased tensions between progress and preservation, fostering an atmosphere of suspicion and rivalry among industrialists and nations alike. As Caleb observed these changes, he realized that his efforts to instill sustainability had inadvertently introduced new forms of conflict. The balance he sought to achieve was elusive, and the very principles he championed became sources of contention. The harmonious coexistence of progress and sustainability was proving to be more complex and fragile than he had anticipated. One particularly stark example was the development of steam power. While Caleb had encouraged the adoption of steam technology for its efficiency and potential for reducing environmental impact, the rapid expansion of steam-powered industries led to a surge in pollution and resource consumption that mirrored the very problems he had hoped to avert. Caleb grappled with the implications of his actions. Each intervention, no matter how well-intentioned, seemed to open new avenues for conflict and chaos. The cycle of ambition and greed persisted, merely manifesting in different forms and under different guises. Realizing that his influence was not yielding the desired outcome, Caleb faced a moment of profound introspection. He had set out to change the course of history, to prevent humanity's self-destruction, but in doing so, he had only redirected the forces of human nature toward new ends. The fundamental flaws he had sought to mitigate remained unaltered, and his interventions had merely delayed the inevitable spiral toward conflict and chaos. Determined to find a resolution, Caleb decided to take a step back and reassess his approach. He recognized that his attempts to directly influence key figures and events were creating more harm than good, exacerbating the very issues he sought to prevent. Instead, he contemplated a more subtle strategy, one that focused on fostering resilience and adaptability within communities, rather than attempting to steer the grand arc of history. Caleb shifted his efforts toward empowering individuals and fostering grassroots movements that prioritized sustainability and ethical practices. He encouraged the formation of cooperatives, the sharing of knowledge, and the development of community-based solutions to environmental challenges. By nurturing these localized initiatives, Caleb hoped to create a network of resilient communities that could collectively steer humanity toward a more sustainable and peaceful future. This approach yielded some positive results. Communities that embraced cooperative models and sustainable practices began to thrive, demonstrating that it was possible to balance progress with environmental stewardship. Caleb felt a sense of accomplishment as he witnessed these pockets of resilience emerge, believing that this decentralized approach could counterbalance the larger forces of ambition and greed. However, the overarching issues of resource scarcity and technological competition continued to loom large. As sustainable practices became more widespread, the demand for certain resources increased, leading to new forms of competition and conflict. Caleb realized that the challenges he faced were deeply rooted in the very fabric of human society, and that addressing them required more than just localized solutions. In a final bid to restore balance, Caleb decided to undertake a significant intervention, one that would attempt to address the root causes of humanity's self-destructive tendencies. He resolved to influence the collective consciousness, fostering a cultural shift that emphasized empathy, cooperation, and long-term thinking over short-term gains and individualistic pursuits. This ambitious plan involved engaging with the broader intellectual and cultural currents of the time, promoting philosophies and ideologies that aligned with his vision of a sustainable and harmonious future. Caleb sought to inspire a generation of thinkers and leaders who valued the well-being of the planet and future generations above personal or national interests. Yet, as Caleb implemented this final strategy, he encountered the ultimate challenge: human nature itself. The ingrained traits of ambition, greed, and competition proved to be formidable barriers to the cultural transformation he envisioned. Despite his best efforts, the fundamental aspects of human behavior remained resistant to change, ensuring that conflicts and struggles for power continued unabated. Caleb stood at the precipice of despair, realizing that his mission to alter humanity's course might be futile. The more he tried to guide and reshape history, the more he became entangled in the very dynamics he sought to dismantle. The timeline, resilient yet unforgiving, seemed determined to follow its own path, indifferent to his interventions. Caleb's journey through time had taught him a harsh truth: the destiny of humanity was intertwined with its inherent nature, and altering that nature was an insurmountable challenge. Each attempt to steer history toward a better future had only served to highlight the unchanging aspects of human behavior, revealing a cycle of self-destruction that was deeply embedded within society. As he stood amidst the bustling streets of 1705 London, Caleb felt a profound sense of resignation. The efforts he had made, the lives he had touched, and the changes he had attempted, all seemed to be in vain. The timeline was unyielding, and humanity's trajectory remained steadfastly toward conflict and collapse. With a heavy heart, Caleb activated his time machine one final time, preparing to return to his original timeline. He knew that the future he had sought to change was unavoidable, a testament to the enduring complexities of human nature and society. As the machine whirred to life, Caleb took one last look at the world he had tried to save, a world where the seeds of destruction were sown deep within the very essence of humanity. The journey back to the dystopian future was swift and disorienting. Caleb emerged once more in Neo-Chicago, the neon-lit cityscape a stark contrast to the historical setting he had just left. The sky remained a sickly orange, and the sounds of chaos filled the air. As ever, Caleb wandered through the decaying city, reflecting on his journey through time. The lessons he had learned were both profound and disheartening. He had attempted to change the course of history, to prevent the collapse of civilization, but in doing so, he had only accelerated its descent into new forms of chaos and conflict. The underlying issues of human nature, ambition, greed, and violence, were immutable, ensuring that humanity's self-destructive tendencies would find new outlets regardless of the era. In a moment of solitude, Caleb found himself in a quiet, desolate city square. The remnants of what was once a vibrant hub of activity now lay in ruins, a testament to the relentless march of time and the inevitable decline of civilization. He sat on a worn bench, gazing out at the desolate horizon, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. As he contemplated his failures, a sense of clarity began to emerge from the depths of his despair. Caleb realized that the future he had desperately tried to change was not solely the result of external factors but was deeply rooted in the very fabric of human existence. The struggles, conflicts, and self-destructive behaviors were inherent aspects of the human condition, not merely consequences of technological or environmental factors. This realization marked a turning point for Caleb. He understood that the fight to change humanity's course was perhaps misguided, that the path of self-destruction was an inescapable destiny woven into the tapestry of human history. The future wasn't a fixed point to be altered but a culmination of countless choices and actions that were intrinsically tied to the nature of humanity itself. With this newfound understanding, Caleb made a decisive choice. Instead of continuing his futile attempts to alter the timeline, he resolved to embrace the inevitability of humanity's fate. He began to dismantle his time machine, piece by piece, symbolizing his acceptance of the natural progression of time and the limitations of his influence. As he worked, Caleb felt a sense of peace wash over him. He realized that resistance against the inherent flaws of humanity was a battle he could never win, and that perhaps the only way to find solace was to accept the path that lay before him. The end of time, as he had once feared, was not a catastrophic event to be averted but a natural culmination of the evolutionary journey of life and the planet. Caleb's final moments in Neo-Chicago were filled with a bittersweet acceptance. The city around him continued its slow descent into decay, yet within him, a sense of resolution took root. He had traversed the corridors of time, witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, and grappled with the complexities of human nature. In the end, he understood that some destinies are immutable, and that the true lesson lay not in the attempt to change the future but in the recognition of its inevitability. As he completed the disassembly of his time machine, Caleb took one last look at the world he had tried so desperately to save. The neon lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the crumbling infrastructure below. The city, once a symbol of human achievement, now stood as a monument to the cyclical nature of history and the enduring resilience of self-destructive tendencies. With the time machine dismantled, Caleb felt a profound sense of closure. He had given everything he had to the cause of saving humanity, but ultimately, he had been powerless to alter its course. The realization was both humbling and liberating, freeing him from the burden of his mission and allowing him to find peace in acceptance. As the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the decaying city, Caleb walked away from the remnants of his once hopeful endeavor. He ventured into the fading light, leaving behind the ruins of Neo-Chicago and the weight of his failed mission. The world continued to crumble around him, but Caleb no longer saw it as a sign of impending doom. Instead, he viewed it as a necessary step in the eternal cycle of creation and destruction, evolution and extinction. In his final moments, Caleb reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had traveled through time, faced the consequences of his actions, and ultimately come to terms with the unchangeable aspects of human nature. His story was a testament to the futility of resisting destiny, and a reminder that sometimes, the only way to move forward is to let go. As he disappeared into the decaying horizon, Caleb carried with him the wisdom of his experiences, a profound understanding that the end is not merely a conclusion, but a transformation. And in that transformation, there lies the potential for new beginnings. Even as one chapter closes, sometimes, the end is just the beginning. And sometimes, the beginning is an ending waiting to happen. The end.